With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Robinson from Construct Reach.
Thank you, Cephas. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. You guys gotta sound like you're excited. We put a lot of work in. This is an amazing event. Good morning. Yes, we're so happy to have you guys. Like Cephas said, I am Paul Robinson, founder and CEO of Construct Reach, and we've got an amazing day that is set up for you guys today. We're doing our best to make sure that you guys can feel the energy, understand the atmosphere that is taking place in the room, and so we've went through a lot of things to make sure that our virtual audience is being able to feel like what's taking place in this room. And so thank you guys for tuning in virtually. I'll give you that fist pump as well, and we'll go ahead and get into it. I am going to introduce our panelists that we're going to have in front of us today for the next 90 minutes, right? So being able to engage in some very significant dialogue, okay? All right, so if we go ahead and pull that up, because I know maybe with some of the distance, but if we get a chance to go ahead and pull up some of our panelists right here, I'll go ahead and just kind of make my way this way, right? From left to right. So I'll get out of the way. So starting over here first, we have Rowena Holmes. Rowena has been an amazing gem, just having conversations leading up to this. She's been working in crime prevention as a specialist for the city of Minneapolis for the last 29 years. Did I get it right?
Wow.
Yes. So thank you, Rowena, for joining us today. All right. Next up, we have Steve McCready's. Steve McCready's is the Vice President of Construction at Target Corporation. Been a huge supporter and partner since day one, the conception of this. And so we thank Steve for joining us today. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. And next up, we got my man. Yes, Reverend Adrian Williams, Senior Pastor of Sanctuary Covenant Church that's here in Minneapolis. Thank you for joining us today, Adrian.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And let's give it up. Last but not least, we have Brandon Williams, a very bright young man. He's got an amazing story. I had a chance to have some conversations with him leading up to this, and I said we have got to have him on this panel. And so we thank you, Brandon, Criminal Justice and Safe Communities Fellow for the Minneapolis Foundation here in our city. So let's give it up for our panelists. All right. So we wanted to make sure that we got a chance to have this piece incorporated for this event, for Build to Heal. This is a 3-day event, and it's very significant, right? We do the I Built This piece, which introduces a younger, diverse demographic to construction, and being able to showcase the visibility that exists within this industry, exposing them to the opportunities that exist, the different career pathways, but understanding the context and the climate, right, of where we are as a society. We felt that it was very necessary to have a conversation like this, right? To sit down, to have dialogue, to begin to identify, right, some of the barriers that have maybe prohibited the construction industry from being as diverse as it should be and being more representative of the working population today, to identify a pathway forward, right? And so we thank you guys for joining us here today in a very much needed conversation. And so I want to make sure that we get into some of these questions that we have for us today. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be moderating, asking certain questions to our panelists for them to share as they please, making sure that you guys are being able to kind of take notes, listen in, hearing from the community's perspective, right? This is all of our community. And so one of the things that we want to begin to do is not just be close from a proximity standpoint, but from a relational standpoint as well. So we figured this is a very good setting to allow us to do so. So if that's good, we're going to do this for about 60 minutes, and then we're going to go into some Q&A as well, if there's any questions that you guys have, both in person and virtually with our panelists here today. Sounds good? Wonderful. All right.
That's good.
So of course we all know that the eyes have been centered on the city of Minneapolis for quite some time now. And I want to ask the panelists, I want to ask you guys, right? This is your city. Thankfully, I got a chance to spend 7 amazing years living here from St. Louis, Missouri. And so I thank you just for welcoming me back and asking me to be part of this. I do still feel like I am part of this community, but how was the community impacted, if you will, by the death of George Floyd. You guys mind speaking to that?
Initially, I was in shock. I was in shock that someone could so very callously kill another human being and not even think twice about it. And for a time period, it was like time stood still because I was waiting to see, well, what happens next? And that was a relatively short period of time, but it seemed like a long time for me because I had to take all of this in and so close to me.
No, that was very heavy. Anybody else? You guys kind of want to shed light on that? Just how was the city impacted? You know, because there's certain things that we see from afar, right? But being in the vicinity, being in the community, being tied to the community, having those relationships, right? Being African American men, right? How did that impact the community?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I think context matters for me. As a trained historian, that's my academic background. Context matters, and I just think first about the year that we've had in 2020. We were, at the time that Brother George Floyd was killed, we were 3.5 months into social distancing, the sort of stay-at-home order. And so for 3.5 months, our way of life had already been interrupted. And the community that I serve in North Minneapolis is a community that historically, when the rest of the Twin Cities has a cold, we have the flu. It's already disadvantaged. There's so many ways in which we are a challenged community, and COVID accelerated what was already true about a large part of North Minneapolis. And so in the midst of seeing the community hurting, people fearful, not quite knowing what this disease was and how it was impacting us, but definitely hearing that it was even more dangerous for Black and brown people who suffered health disparities already. In the midst of that, this video comes out on Memorial Day evening of a Minneapolis police officer kneeling on the neck of an adult man and hearing that man cry out for his mother. And it seemed like that 8 minutes, 46 seconds, it seemed like it took days. And you just wondered, why doesn't someone get him off of this guy's neck? And so in North Minneapolis, immediately as that video came out and the news started to trickle out that next morning, there was a very real tension in the air. It was thick. Like there were just people walking around where our church is located is right on the corner of Broadway and Lindale, one of the most challenged parts of the community. There were people walking around in the parking lot, just screaming and saying F the police, and it just resurfaced all these hard feelings and feelings of distrust that were already there between the community and the police. And as the hours went by, people started to make the connection between what happened to George Floyd, what had happened to Jamar Clark back in 2015, what had happened to Philando Castile shortly after that, and what had happened just recently to Thurman Blevins in North Minneapolis. There's this long list of names of folks in the community who've lost their life at the hands of those who are supposed to serve and protect us. And so all those things began to pile on. And before you knew it, it was like any little thing would set the community off. And we knew if we as a church and others who are stakeholders in the community had not stepped forward to begin to help the people to process this anger, something was gonna happen. And I believe the only reason things have not gotten worse here in the Twin Cities is because of the good work that a lot of people have done to try to help the community heal. But there's a lot of hurt still here today over what's been going on in our nation and here in the Twin Cities.
That's a very good take. Thank you, Edrin. I don't know, Brandon, you wanna speak to that from your perspective?
Just briefly to expand, number one, thank you for giving me the platform to speak my truth and be here today. I think, number one, being a Gen Z, right? Being a Gen Zer, it felt like a minefield in a sense, right? There was Ahmaud Arbery, there was Breonna Taylor, there was different situations that was coming up that would cause a lot of question. But being in a time of social media, where it's really hard to scroll through and see something without hearing about these situations and seeing a video or hearing a post or seeing something about, you know, the way in which the criminal justice system is handling a lot of these situations, it just felt as if it was a minefield. And there were so many things setting off different minds in that, from hearing of situations of injustice where justice wasn't found in a situation, or to hear that there was nothing that was going to happen if the video didn't surface, you know, if the video did not surface at the time. I just think that it was very powerful to see young people coming together from different communities saying, well, we're not going to take this. And I think that it's another thing to be courageous for other people and say, well, I'm representing another community, maybe not myself, maybe a sibling who's growing up in this area, maybe someone that was in the same situation that George Floyd may have been in at a different time. It was just a minefield, and I think people were navigating that in different ways. You know, some people were trying to inform other people, some people were trying to be there as a support system, and other people were being advocates saying that this is something that shouldn't happen, not here, not in a different city, and it shouldn't happen again, ever.
No, thank you for that take. And you know, of course, from a proximity standpoint, you know, as we have our virtual audience that are tuning in, you know, we are on East Lake Street, and we are, you know, just a shade over 2 miles from which that took place. But it's important for us to recognize, you know, kind of the context, and that does matter. You know, like you said, Edrin, of kind of everything that is taking place, the climate in which we're in. And so it was very important for us to host this event from right here, right? Like right in the community, right in the thick of maybe the pain and the disparities or what have you, to begin to come and try to navigate and lead a pathway forward, right? And so, of course, we're outside right now, but Target was damaged, you know, in the wake of George Floyd's death, along with a lot of other businesses and companies that are in this community. Steve, you want to speak just a little bit to maybe kind of what the response was to that? You know, it's a building that's destroyed, but you know, understanding the climate and everything of that, you know, I think you guys have a very good take on understanding the context and kind of what you guys want to do to begin to maybe lead change and not only just restore a building, but to help rebuild a community.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Paul, for hosting this and bringing this group together, and how we in the construction industry can really do our part in order to move this conversation and really build the future and build the future of our community. So thank you for that first. You know, I think in the initial aftermath, obviously, there's first the concern for our team safety. You know, we had a lot of team members. We want to make sure that they maintain their safety, and so that was kind of the initial piece. And then the follow-up on that is quickly how do we begin to support the communities where we have stores, and you know, change the narrative and the dialogue around that, and you know, get our businesses back opening so we can begin to serve the communities, but serve them in a way that reflects those communities.
Yeah, oh, that's good. Thank you. I'll see. You know, what was, you know, we got a chance. You guys expounded on that, and just kind of talking about how things were in the minutes and the days afterwards. But you know, was there anything that happened or that has happened so far that makes you hopeful of a better tomorrow?
Yeah, our church is right across the street from a Cup Foods that was damaged in the uprising immediately after Mr. Floyd's death. And in North Minneapolis, that Cup Foods is the one full-service grocery store in the community. And so, again, a community that was already disadvantaged lost its main food source in an uprising after this, in the midst of this entire thing. And so one of the ways in which our church was able to respond was to, we started out just pulled out our grills and started serving food to people so folks didn't have a way to have some food and to sort of calm that thickness that was in the air. And we put out a request just on social media for folks to, hey, we want to continue to do this every day, make some donations so that we can keep buying hot dogs and water and that kind of stuff. And so the community heard, some folks in the community heard that request as, hey, we want to take whatever donations you have. And so the next day, hundreds of cars started showing up and dropping off grocery donations, essential supplies for diapers for babies, toiletries, and that kind of stuff. And we essentially became a food distribution hub overnight without a desire to do it. Like it just sort of happened. And so for the last two months plus, we've been handing out essential supplies in North Minneapolis to hundreds of families every single time we open our doors. And the thing that gives me hope was, yes, our community stepped up. Yes, the folks within our church stepped up. But we saw people coming from all over the state of Minnesota to give and donate stuff. Folks were hosting drives in their small hometowns, driving a couple hours to Minneapolis, dropping that stuff off, and then we were able to get it right back out to the community. We received donations from all over the country from folks who wanted to give so that we could buy supplies. And one of the coolest stories for me, I come from a small town in South Carolina. You could probably fit everybody in my town in this parking lot. It's a really small town. But we got a email from a small church in some place in Wisconsin that I'd never heard of to say, hey, we heard about what you all were doing, and we're a very small church. We don't have actual money to give, but we have 200 pounds of cheese curds that we want to donate towards what you're doing there in Minneapolis. And for me, that was incredible. At its finest. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm still waiting on those cheese curds to arrive. You know, we don't have the state fair this year, but that for me was a sign of hope that people saw what was happening here in the Twin Cities, and whatever they had to give, they wanted to be a part of helping to rebuild and heal the city. And that gives me hope.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that, you know, you mentioned kind of this convergence of two pandemics. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, you know, that I saw with us having a shared experience with COVID and understanding that our actions have a direct impact on the health and the well-being of somebody else. Yeah. And then for the death of George Floyd to take place, it seemed like we were prepped, if you will, as a nation to have empathy. Yeah. Right? To be able to understand, like, well, I'm not connected, like, personally, but maybe I play a role. Yeah. You know, or there's something that I can do for the well-being of somebody else. Right? And so it seems like this is what makes me hopeful, is that, of course, there's a lot of work to be done, and we're having this conversation, but it seems as if there's this solidarity that's taking place that we really maybe haven't seen in the past, where you have people that are coming from all different walks of life, and they're championing it. Yeah. You know, I felt like a long time when this happened, it was like this point of exhaustion, if you will, because for a long time we felt like, we have had to be the solution to a problem that we didn't create. And that becomes exhausting when you have to be the solution to a problem, right, that you did not create. And so now having that solidarity, now having support, now having the advocates, that's one of the things that's unique about this time that makes me hopeful, right? Yeah. So I don't know, anybody else wanted to kind of share on that, like what you have seen thus far that makes you hopeful for a better tomorrow?
One of the things that makes me hopeful was the fact that there were whites, there were other races that saw this happening to this black man, this person of color. Because I have white friends who know me well, and we talk about a lot of things, but to see a man murdered on TV, and they're like, what can we do? I never knew this happened. Because if it doesn't happen to you, it's not personal. It's personal when it happens to you or someone whom you care about. So in the ensuing conversations, I've talked about things where you can do this. You can donate clothes. You can donate old toys. As a crime prevention specialist, I have all of North Minneapolis south of West Broadway. So I have Cub, and I have Walgreens, and we've been to Sanctuary before, my coworker Tori Stone and I. And it feels good to know that we're not in this alone.
Amen. Amen.
Because people can see. They can see. And this was, if ever there was a moment to say, oh my God, that was it. Because this man was killed on national TV, and they saw him throughout the world. And his picture and his death will be shared years to come. We made a moment in history, but I think it was a turning point, and it should be a turning point. I pray that it is a turning point.
Yeah, yeah. Good.
I can speak. Yeah,
okay.
So for me, I think hope comes in understanding. And I was interviewed by my boss, Shonda Smith-Baker. She's the Senior Vice President of Community Impact at the Minneapolis Foundation. It was her along with Nina Roberson, who's the Director of Step Up here in Minneapolis, and then myself. We were talking about understanding, right? We have a situation right now where people don't have faith in our criminal justice system. And with not having that faith, we talk about different understandings of the criminal justice system now. And Shonda grew up in an area of Minneapolis where she didn't have to worry about the police or shootings in a certain situation that she did. So there was never any calls to her house or things like that, or even remotely close to her. And Nina, you know, she sadly lost her brother 2 years ago, and she lost her mother a year after that, and a cousin. So we were just talking about the trauma and the different engagements that people have with the criminal justice system. And for myself, I mean, I've lived over in North Minneapolis on 17th and DuPont. And right on DuPont, it's across the street from a school, Ascension, but I've had my house raided probably about 3 times, and the justification was that we have family members coming in and out of the house so much that's what justified it. So to have different relationships and experiences with, you know, law enforcement and different things in the community, it allows people to relate and understand different situations. So the more that we were having that conversation, we were really realizing, like, this is kind of like a microcosm of what's happening, because so many people have different experiences, and they say, well, I've never had that. You know, what is it like to have the police kick in your door and go through your house, you know, and then leave and don't have to do anything but say, you know, well, we had justification, or, you know, to have family members murdered, but then also to have no type of relationship or experience with the police officers outside of maybe having family members as police officers and having that love for them. So for me, it's having those deep conversations about what make us different, what make our experiences different, and how do we still go beyond that to understand and hear each other.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Thank you for that. You know, and so as we think about, right, the narrative that we have for these next 3 days, and talking about, you know, build to heal, one of the things that we have to kind of recognize and to put back into context, if you will, is that, you know, the industry is in need, right, of fresh talent coming through the pipeline, right? We saw the video where we see the average age of specifically skilled laborers being toward retirement, right? And so as far as the sustainability of the industry, right, there's a need to tap into this upcoming generation untapped potential, right, that is more diverse, right, than in the past. And so there's a need to understand, right, the barriers maybe that are within communities that are disadvantaged or what have you, or those who are not represented in the community, so that we understand the audience, so that we can prepare an industry that's ready to receive them successfully, right? And that's one of the things, you know, that we wanted to make sure that we were able to put into context as to kind of why we have a conversation about this when we're talking specifically about construction, because it's very important to understand context. Right, when you're trying to provide upward mobility. Yeah. It's very important to provide context when you're trying to create this environment that says, hey, we're in need of you, and we have something to be gained, right, and to be learned by you as well. You add value, right? But being able to make those accessible, you have to understand context. You have to understand like where people are coming from. And so having a conversation like this, being able to hear right from the source, if you will, from boots on the ground, from the community, it allows us to begin as an industry to have this understanding so that we can operate from this position of being informed, right? So then that informs the decisions that we make. It informs outreach. It informs how intentional we are with reaching a younger, diverse demographic that there's opportunity for. So making sure that we put them in a position to succeed and have success, right? So just to kind of put the conversation into its proper context. That makes sense? Yeah. It's good? Yeah. I think the virtual audience just gave me a heads up. It's good? All right. Yeah. So moving along, I want to ask this question here to our panelists. You know, do you guys feel, right, that our current kind of societal upheaval regarding equity has been an issue within the industry as well, right? We know that the percentages are low. When we think about African Americans, the representation there is under 6%. When you think about females, the representation, within that industry is less than 10%, right? So, unfortunately, kind of what we are experiencing as a society, it correlates in some sense to the industry as well. I mean, that's why companies like Construct Reach exist, to diversify the industry, to allow us to tap into a younger, diverse demographic for the sustainability, but also to be able to change the narrative and community context for those people who are now able to have successful careers. Right, so have you guys kind of seen some type of connection? Like, do you think that what's happening, I guess, in our society as a whole, right, when we're talking about the need for equity, do you feel like that is an opportunity for the industry to kind of, take more notice of?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump a little bit in on the hopefulness, and it ties. I mean, I think the data just shows. I mean, you just said the data. The data shows that it's not a diverse industry in total, and it's also one that has a looming workforce shortage. So if you could look at both those as being the solution to the same problem, why wouldn't you look at that? And so I think that's why I'm hopeful. I look at this room here and the virtual audience. I'd say never before have I been at an event where we've had contractors, subcontractors, labor unions, owners, community leaders kind of all together really trying to talk about how to move the industry and frankly our communities in a way that then our industry aligns with the communities in which they're building in. And I think that's what makes me hopeful and why I'm really appreciative for all the group that's actually showed up here physically in what I'll say is a beautifully social distance manner here, as well as our online presence as well. So.
Yeah, I love that, Paul, that you're framing this conversation in the sense of a bottom line. Like when you think about the state of Minnesota, we're becoming grayer than we've ever been. Like the average age of the state is increasing. People are retirement age, and as the video talked about, there's just not a pipeline right now of enough people to replace those folks that we're losing to retirement. But the state is also becoming more brown than it's ever been, more non-white than it's ever been. And so I think from a strictly bottom line perspective, even if you ignore all the stuff we talked about earlier around social injustices, just from an economic standpoint, it makes sense for us to do better in Minnesota. Because Minnesota won't continue to be this lovely, prosperous place that it has been historically if we're not doing more to bring those increasing number of Black and brown people into the workforce, highly trained. And so that means practically our schools have to get better. Like we can't wait until someone is 26 years old and then try to introduce them to what we're talking about today. Our K through 12 education has to get better. Preschool has to be an option in communities like South Minneapolis and North Minneapolis. We have to do more in terms of allowing people to live their best lives so that all of us can do better. Because all of us do better when all of us do better. That's absolutely true. And so I think even if you don't and I hope there's nobody in the audience who would say this, but even if you don't really care about the fact that people are black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by the stuff that we're talking about in the criminal justice system, I would hope, even if that's you, that you would have enough business acumen to think my business model won't last, won't prosper without a trained, educated workforce. And so we all need to do better. And so I think I love the fact that we can talk about this from sort of that soft social justice perspective, but we can also talk about this from an economic perspective. And I'd hope that increasingly we would see companies working so that when I drive past MnDOT's 1 million work projects that they have around the state, that it's not just a group of all white men out there. I would love to see more black and brown folks on those work sites. I would love to see more women on those work sites. We recently built our church in North Minneapolis, a $7 million building, and we were intentional to say we will not work with construction companies that don't have at least an X percentage of their subcontractors be women or a person of color led businesses. And so I think that's something practical that anybody can do. And I would hope if we were to walk through this work site here at Target that we would see women and people of color working, because construction is an industry where you can make a solid living. And if you're talking about crime prevention, a good job is a perfect way to prevent crime.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you for that, Edrin. Yeah.
When I hear of equity, I think about exposure, right? And growing up in this community, I went to Cristo Rey, which is Lake and Forth, probably a few miles down the road. We had a relationship with Cargill, being that some of our students interned there. But in terms of construction as a whole, I wasn't exposed to, that type of sector in life. And I think going around, you see different constructions of roads and different constructions of buildings. But at the same time, there was no inclusion there. I didn't feel included. I didn't feel like it represented, who I was or the people that I was. And then when you would go to some of the sites, you would see the same people. So you think of some of the same people owning the same companies, building the same companies, and being a part of that, you really don't feel included. And I think a lot of that happens, disassociation as a result of that. So then when you're in the community, although I went to school there, when I would come to Target, I would feel like it's a great building, and I see these great organizations, you see there's Cubs, there's different places in the building, there's just no association because I wasn't involved in it. And I think being a part of Cristo Rey would be great, other high schools as well, to have companies go and be activators rather than reactionary, saying, okay, what can we do now that this has happened versus before that even happened? We want to include people. We want to encourage more people to be a part of the sector, whatever the situation may be. And when you talk about criminal justice reform, maybe that's being a part of law enforcement in different ways. And when you talk about construction, that can be everything from owning the business to making those decisions to building some of the organizations. It's just a part about exposure and then, reputation as well with that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because you guys kind of sort of answered this in your responses, but right. So how does equity, right, help the community?
Yeah. Very, very. To be frank, when things happen like the uprising after George Floyd's death, many of the things that were damaged were things that the community didn't think it was theirs in the first place. Like there's no connection in many of these places from the folks who actually live here and many of the businesses around them. I think we have to do more as business owners, as corporations, to allow the community to feel like this Target belongs to me. Yeah. Because we're not gonna harm our own stuff, and you hear reactions on social media and those places, and why would people damage their own stuff? People aren't damaging their own stuff. They know when people are coming into the community, making money off of them, and driving back to the suburbs and living there. But if there's more we could do in terms of making this establishment and others like it something that the community says this is ours, takes ownership for, I think we would see these events play out differently. In North Minneapolis, in the days after George Floyd's death, we saw the community coming out and protecting the shops that were owned by the community. We saw, because it wasn't just the community tearing up stuff. There were outside forces coming here to damage and hurt the community. And we saw the community say, no, you're not going to harm our churches. You're not going to harm our schools. You're not going to harm other things in the community that have served the community. And so I think there's great work to be done to help the community see that this store and others like it, other businesses, actually belong to the community and not just to some folks who don't live here but come here to make money.
Yeah. You know, I've always felt like the industry of construction is, it's primed to be able to really lead in a significant way.
Absolutely.
Right, because construction translates to life like seamlessly almost.
Absolutely.
Right, you have all of these different trades, right, that specialize in certain packages and certain aspects of a facility that will, you know, one day through the collective effort of each and every person who is gifted differently, playing their part, make something that's beautiful.
Yep.
Right, and so it's like that's what community is. You have people that come from all different walks of life that have these various gifts, that have these various talents, that have these various presuppositions, right, and they're looking through life from a different lens, but they have something to offer.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to allow that and to acknowledge the value that each person has, and to cast that vision and say, hey, this is what we can do collectively together. And yeah, let me make sure that you're heard and let me take into consideration your vantage point and where you come from. And then let me allow everybody to have a voice, and then we can collectively agree on how to move forward in the most efficient way. I mean, that is construction. That's project management 101, right? So it's being able to really understand that, and that's one of the things that I wanted to kind of bring to the forefront. That's why I believe construction is in a position to really build to heal, because how we build is very significant. How we build can speak more than just to a building. How we build can actually be kind of the foundation to restoring a healthier community.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, guys, any other takes?
I think when we talk about equity and inclusion, we have to look deep within. Because when the playing field becomes leveled, everybody has the same opportunities. And I've always said in life that I can play any game in town if I know the rules.
Yeah.
But if you change the rules on me in the middle of the game, then I can't play.
Yeah.
And I feel good. My heart is not as heavy when I look at all. This man died, and what has happened thus far. I feel like he's looking down from heaven, because we know he was the sacrificial lamb. Everybody saw him everywhere. But now we've got this. We've got our neighborhood Target, because I live in South Minneapolis and use this Target, being renovated by a people of color organization. I think that's fantastic. And for me, when I see young women in non-traditional roles, I am so ecstatic. When I was in school, young women learned how to sew. I never did get it right. And how to cook. I'm not a good cook. I wanted to take auto mechanics, but they told me, no, you can't take that, you're a girl.
Yeah.
And now, young ladies are not only becoming into the field. I met this young lady who said, I built Hosmer. I redid Hosmer. And I said, well, that's my library. She said, well, I redid it. And I said, I got to talk to you. I got to talk to you.
Yeah.
So it just makes my heart feel all the better, because I'm of the age I'll be retiring, but to know that there are young people coming up that will have choices, that the college, 4 years of college, and then an advanced degree and more if you want it, that's not for everybody. Like you said, everyone can find something in construction. You can find your gift. So that really gives me hope. I feel great about that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rowena. I mean, and that's important. Like, you know, we've heard the significance of exposure several times. And, you know, what we have coming up in the next 2 days, that's what it's about. It's exposure. If you never see what you can become, then you don't think, right, that that's an option for you. And I think one of the most important things to do is to give those people options.
Yeah.
You know, you have these young adults or these budding young adults at times who are transitioning into this next stage in life of being a young adulthood, and from a community standpoint, right, externally they have a lot of expectations, right? So what are you going to do with your life? You know, what job are you going to have, or what school are you going to go to? So they have these like external kind of expectations. But internally, they have those as well. What am I good at? Well, I'm good at this, but I don't know. Can I make a living doing that? Or I've never had any introduction to anything else. And so it's troubling both externally because there's expectations for you to make this transition into young adulthood in a very informed way. But when you don't have any exposure that introduces you to what you may have this amazing gift and talent for, then, I mean, you're left in this awkward position, right? And so that's one of the things that we try to do, that we try to be very intentional about. You know, and we'll speak more to this toward the second part of today about how intentional we are to make sure that we are exposing these young people to what's available to them, and the collective effort that we do to introduce them to so many different career pathways that they can take, to give them those options, right? And to showcase, you know, how we're doing our due diligence as much as we can to make those that accessibility, right, reachable for them. And so, you know, it's been very good to kind of have the dialogue and to hear the various perspectives, because once again, just to reiterate that, because it's very important, context matters, right? And so, I mean, one of the first things about, you know, communicating, right? It's not always about speaking, but being able to listen as well. That's what makes you an effective communicator. And one of the things that we cannot do is ever stop communicating, right? We either have verbals or nonverbals. You cannot stop communicating, right? So even if you don't say anything, or even if you don't address something, you're still communicating something. So it's important to be informed so that we can lead in a very intentional way to address what's already kind of on the minds of this younger, diverse demographic that's coming, hopefully, into the industry, so that we can make sure that we're prepared to receive them. And so, you know, it's important, you know, just once again, just kind of say it, you know, to reiterate that significance of context. And so, yeah, I mean, it's been great. You guys have any other things? I know we're getting kind of close to our Q&A portion of this segment, but any other comments, any other thoughts?
For me, I would just like to say, a lot of the times people ask, being a younger person, how does it feel to experience these things and to be, you know, growing up during this time where there's social media, there's different innovative ways to address different situations in the community. Sometimes it's unexplainable when you think about it, because when I was watching a video of George Floyd, right, I didn't just see one individual or one incident, or I didn't see 4 police officers. I saw representation. I saw a criminal justice system that myself, my children, even my ancestors have dealt with, but now some of those issues have been put on a back burner, and it's up to me and the community now to say that, well, for us coming up, we will not accept it. Like, maybe before, we can't speak to what have happened before in a situation. We know that there's been many different freedom fighters and people fighting for situations, and we have to continue that fight by saying that we cannot allow this. And I think that happens in many different ways. Sometimes that's protesting. It even reach sometimes where it gets to riots, where people are saying, how do we contain this energy that we have? I was reading this article that talked about, as the generations pass, people's attention span gets shorter, right? So when you think about it, you have a very short window to catch someone's attention before you lose it. And I think growing up, you're right, in different situations, I've experienced people where the moment you lose them, it's really hard to get them back, because you had that amount of time to show who you were, to show where you were about. And I feel like sometimes, even being here during a protest, right, I was here, you know, May 28th, I've seen the different buildings being burnt. I was here, you know, helping people with gallons of milk, you know, helping them with their eyes and seeing different situations. People from Augsburg, I went to Augsburg for undergrad, and trying to be in community, telling people, be mindful of what you're doing, be mindful of these situations, it's just difficult because there's so much emotion, there's so much feeling, there's so much thinking that goes into that. And when you're someone that's coming up, so if I think about a police force that I'll have to encounter, even when I was younger, I would think about it. So I see what's happening to, my family members, people in the community. So what'll happen when I drive a car? What'll happen when the police stop me? What'll happen when I go to school? What'll happen when I'm expected to leave? Do they expect me to keep up those ways? Do they expect me to accept it? And after you realize that answer is no, and then for a lot of other people coming up with you, the answer is no, it builds this community of not accepting some of the wrongdoing and injustices. So equity is a part of correcting that and being able to say, well, we want to give you a platform. You will be here. Even for myself, I'm 23, but a lot of the times I ask young people, what do you want to see happen? How do I work to serve you? Because you're next. I'll be here for a blimp, right? My time is only, immediate, but after that, we have to build communities for other people that are outside of ourselves in different ways. So equity is very, very important right now.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Thank you for that take. Let's see. So now we can go into, actually, we can transition into our Q&A. Questions are important, right? If we don't ask, then we may not know, right? And so it's creating the setting, creating the atmosphere, and setting the tone, to let questions be okay, right? I think that's how you learn. That's how you discover things, is by being able to ask questions. And we're in a situation where dialogue needs to take place, right? Where we get a chance to maybe ask each other questions, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to set aside some time to have Q&A for anybody that is in person or virtually, to be able to ask questions. And so I know we've got, oh yeah. So appropriately, we've got it, right? So you can go and post a question, just to make sure that we are kind of, keeping up with our guidelines and our social distancing. We've just created a landing page where you can actually post your questions too, and then they'll feed in real time, and then we'll be able to hear them from the back as they ask those questions. So yeah, you guys can go ahead and take a few minutes and just kind of take everything in collectively. Ask any questions that you have online, and we'll try our best to answer them.
Some music now? You can take,
Again, go to constructreach.com/ask for any questions, and we will get them right away and start answering.
Oh, Steve's got a question.
I got a question. When we assembled this, Paul came with this idea and assembled this group. Just question to the panel here. What were your thoughts as you were, asked to come speak here and be part of this group and speak to what is, here and virtually a pretty unique group of contractors, owners, union representatives, kind of the pretty broad spectrum of the construction industry. So what was your first reaction? What did you think?
Yeah.
Ladies first. Well, initially, I thought, well, I'm not in construction. I'm a crime prevention specialist. But as Pastor said, the best type of crime prevention is a job. And when Reverend Arthur Erickson asked me, I immediately said yes. Whatever Art asked me to do, I do. So as I thought about it, and as I got the questions, and as I was preparing, I just began to look around, and I felt we are so blessed right now because, when I'm driving through North Minneapolis, I'll see young brothers hanging out on the corner, and I'll see white men up poles and digging manholes and doing all kinds of things and driving delivery trucks. And I'll think, why can't these brothers do that? There's so much talent wasted in Minneapolis. I work North Minneapolis, everything south of Broadway, but I live South Minneapolis. And this is such a blessing.
Yeah.
This is just such a blessing that we can have this, and that young girls don't have to take home ec now. They have a choice. Because I would have been there. I would have been first one in line. So I'm just thankful that you're here and thankful that your heart is in this. I can tell that this is you, that you've put everything into it. And this is wonderful. Wonderful for our young people, all young people, because so many of them, as you said, as they get ready to graduate, they don't know what they're going to do. They're not sure, but there's that external pressure. Well, you have to go to college, and you have to go to this college, and you have to get good grades. And some of them, they don't know. But this gives them an opportunity to look inside, see what they like, what they enjoy, and then do it.
Yeah. I said yes to this opportunity first because Paul's my guy, and I'm going to support anything he's doing. But even more so, when I look at the challenges that face our community, I realize it's complex. I struggle with simple answers to complex issues that we face as a community. And I know if North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis and the Twin Cities as a whole is actually going to be healthy and people are going to prosper, we have to look at economics, we have to look at jobs, we have to look at schools, we have to look at healthcare, we have to look at housing. All those various systems are what keep people in those places of poverty. And I think what the conversation we're having here today and the work that you all are doing is really an attempt to systematically lift people out of poverty. I think if people aren't able to do more than what their parents did, like we're in trouble. My mother has an 11th grade education. My grandmother had an 8th grade education. My grandfather a 4th grade education. And if I was limited to what they were able to accomplish, I'd be in trouble. But education, a good job, some of the things that we're talking about today allow us to do more than the previous generation did. And so I really want to reiterate, if Minnesota is going to be the prosperous place that it has been and can be, we have to take these issues seriously and make sure that the folks who call South Minneapolis home, folks who call North Minneapolis home, folks who call the east side of St. Paul home, see themselves as having a pathway to not just shop at Target, but to perhaps one day help build a Target or own a Target or be a stakeholder at Target or work at Target Corporation. Like, they have to see themselves as having an opportunity to be at the table if this big experiment that we call the American dream actually is going to work.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay, we got a question?
Yes, we do. We have plenty of questions, so let's get started.
Okay.
Our first question is this: what can we do as companies who are present today?
Oh, that is a very good question.
What can we do?
Do I jump in now or?
Yeah, I can give my perspective. For me, it goes back to inclusion, right? When you think about an organization, right, I've seen many different commercials of businesses that are doing great work and have these different representations, but a lot of the time I don't feel that, right? It's one thing to watch TV or to scroll down your phone or to see certain ways in which people are presented, but to actually feel it and experience is a different thing. And I think for Target, a lot of the relationship has been as a consumer and not as a community member, right? If we're all in this or playing different roles together, like you talked about crossing sectors and different situations, I think that finding ways to include people, to be actually foundational with what you're doing and be a part of the community, I think that's a big thing for me, and a big thing for a lot of younger people to actually have relationships as you're getting exposed, as you're growing up, to be familiar with something. And I think that's with anything in life, the more familiar you're with it, the more you feel like you have some sense of ownership or some sense of togetherness, and then you stick with that, versus the other way around where, after 20 years or 26 years, then you're at a point where someone is trying to build or establish a relationship with you. So I think as consumers, as people in the community, as community organizations, or whether it be businesses or whatever it is, building that relationship and reputation with people is powerful.
All right, we have another question. This is coming from Elford Incorporated. What do you think is the best way to get more minorities and women into the construction field? I currently talk about construction in middle and high schools. How can we reach more?
I couldn't hear.
We couldn't hear that.
I apologize.
The speakers are.
So this question is from Elford. This is from Denise. What do you think is the best way to get more minorities and women into the construction field? I currently talk about construction in middle school and high schools. How can we reach more?
So I'm gonna try to paraphrase what I just heard. It's hard to hear the questions with the speakers facing this way. So,
what can we do more? I'm currently active in my community. I'm speaking already to high school and middle school students, but how do we get more minorities and women, especially, engaged into the industry?
yeah, I think it's important for us to understand what do we lead with and how do we introduce them to the industry. I think you have to put a lot of thought on the front end of what you want to accomplish on the back end, because like Edrin said, attention spans are very short. Right, and so you only have a certain amount of time to get their attention and to captivate that audience, if you will. And so it's rethinking, and that's one of the things that we've done, as Construct Reach. It's reimagining what does outreach look like. Right, I know from an industry standpoint, a lot of us are accustomed to the career fairs, or we're accustomed to. Let me face forward. Accustomed to the career fairs, or accustomed to maybe having a referral or what have you, but being able to kind of reimagine what does it look like to really be boots on the ground, to introduce them, to construction in a more innovative way, right? I think one of the things that we try to put emphasis on and to bring to the forefront is that, yes, there's a lot of information for us to give them as an industry. Hey, this is what you need to know to be successful. But as we all know, as human beings, we're very complex. There's different aspects to us, right? And so there's certain things that may catch our attention that can keep us engaged. And so it's being able to appeal to the entire person, right? And so, I don't want to skip ahead too much because I know we're gonna set aside some time for us to kind of showcase what we have available to the young people. But it's reimagining what that outreach looks like and trying to be more creative, even partnering with those surrounding schools or education partners. And that's one of the things that we try to do and facilitate as well, is to try to be creative, be intentional, to engage that younger demographic, to lead with people that they can identify with, not just from an age perspective, not just from an ethnicity perspective, but maybe it's from an interest perspective as well, or like where they're from or what they're into, right? And so it's being more intentional to actually appeal and to affirm the entire person, and then giving them the information along the way.
Yeah.
That's great. You can follow.
Can I add something onto
Sure.
that? I just want to add on to that maybe a minute. And I think when I think of the mission of Construct Reach and the social media connections that's there, and the connection of call that virtual community, because if you don't see yourself on the job, it's hard to see yourself on the job. And I think the social connection that comes from the community that you've built, Paul, on Construct Reach, and that includes individual students, individual workers, because there's great programs in the industry to do the actual training. It's getting the people into the training and having them understand that, and then know once they're there that they're not alone, that there are others. And I think that's what the void that Construct Reach was built to try to fill in our industry. So if you haven't looked at it, I'd say that spend some time looking at what Construct Reach is doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think there needs to be intentional work to understand the historical barriers that have kept African Americans and other people of color out of construction jobs, and you just work backwards from there. And I think a part of it, you look at the construction-related labor unions. Why haven't they been welcoming places for people of color. There's a historical reason why people of color have not been able to get into those and have been able to stay and flourish inside them. And so I think there has to be honest conversation around that. I think there's also the appeal question. Construction sometimes feels like a white guy's thing. Like, I don't think people actually understand how much money you could actually make doing construction. I'm talking to the brothers on the corner in North Minneapolis. They're not making any money out there. Like, if they understood how solid a living you could make doing construction, I believe people would be beating down the doors to get on these construction jobs. And I also think you have to look at the training to do the work. I wish Lewis were here today to talk about what they're doing at Summit Academy, but we need more of those folks who are specifically saying we're working to increase the number of minorities and women who are working in these jobs. We need more pathways in, because historically it's been extremely hard to get in and keep these kinds of jobs for people of color.
Yeah, no, and that's good. And and that's why, we do have to kind of reimagine that and build community, right? And so that you don't feel like you have to win somebody over like the very first time that you meet them. And I think a lot of times, when there's no ongoing relationship between maybe the industry and schools, and that's kind of how we try to add value, is to fill in the gaps and to be that facilitator, right? And so that was one of the things that a lot of educators actually communicated to us, is that they felt like they were not as informed as maybe they used to be in the past, or that they should be, about speaking to young people and their parents about the opportunities that exist within construction.
Yeah.
And that was also another need for them as well. So how do I have an ongoing relationship with the industry so that we don't have to solve everything from A to Z in one setting?
Absolutely.
Can I know that they're coming back, or can I know that I have access to them? And then vice versa, because the industry has had a hard time sometimes with getting in contact with educators, because there's a lot of filters that they have to go through, right? And so we've been able to kind of hear some of the pain points on both sides and begin to bring them close and say, hey, if we can bridge the gap and make sure that we're meeting each other's needs so that we have a viable pathway forward that ultimately, puts our young people in better positions to succeed and for the sustainability of the industry, then that is success.
Absolutely.
Right. So, next question.
All right, we have a question from Tom. Just quickly, just for introduction's sake and be able to follow you on social media, can we please have a brief introduction and how to follow you, each panelist today?
Each panelist?
Yes, they want to know if the panelists real quickly can say their names and how to follow you on social media. Tom from Target wants to get it linked up with every one of you.
At Target.
Oh yeah. Want me to, we can just go this way.
Just Brandon Williams. You can see my face on my page. And you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or that would be best. Or LinkedIn. LinkedIn too. Millennials Gen Z Connection.
Yep. Edrin Williams, that's EDRIN on Facebook. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Edrin Williams. I spend too much time on there, so I should be easy to find.
Yeah, and it's Paul Robinson from Facebook, Paul C. Robinson on Instagram, but of course, Construct Reach, that's one simple word, on all social media platforms. If you go there, then you find me.
Yeah, I guess for me, you probably find me on LinkedIn, the best way for me on that. So Steve McCready's on LinkedIn.
Well, I am on Facebook, and you can certainly follow me, but what you're going to see is a lot of pictures of my grandchildren and my children, what they do, where they went, how long they stayed. I'm still pretty much old school, so you can contact me at my email, Rowena, how it sounds, ROWENA .Holmes, HOLMES, at Minneapolis, spelled out, and then MN.gov.
Awesome, thank you so much. Our next question comes from Joe at Inside Edge. How can general contractors and subcontractors best promote Construct Reach and support your mission? What are some ways we can specifically work within our communities to bring access to construction opportunities to young people and young people of color?
No, that is a very good question. That is conversations that we definitely like to have, with companies. to identify, what opportunities that do they already have going on, and how do we begin to identify a pathway forward, right? To be intentional with not only where they are, but who they are as a company and what they want to accomplish, right? And so a quick answer would be go to constructreach.com and you can click as a general contractor or a contractor, contact us to learn more, and then we can start facilitating those conversations to identify a specific pathway forward for your question.
Good answer.
All right, Mr. Founder. Next question is, this comes from Paul at J. Benson Construction. What steps have been taken, if any, to work directly with the court system to connect referral criminal defenders, right, to Summit Academy or other construction skill training programs for minor offenses?
Is that probably in your wheelhouse,
Yeah,
Brandon?
that's probably something Lewis, well, I wouldn't have a direct answer with that. That might have been something Lewis would have answered.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I said I wouldn't have a direct answer for that.
Okay.
When thinking about the connection to it, that might have been a better question for Lewis, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. We wish we had our other panelists here, Lewis King from Summit Academy, but he had some emergencies that he had to tend to. So wishing the best though for Lewis. That's probably more so an answer that he could have answered. So yeah, we'll have to go on to the next question.
And if you have more information, email us at info@constructreach.com, and we'll make sure that they have Summit Academy's direct contact information to understand what Summit Academy is doing with that particular sector. All right, this comes from Kevin at Gardner Builders. We are establishing an outreach program at our company to help educate younger school kids about construction. In your opinion, what is the ideal age range for us to start targeting and getting the conversation started?
We've had this conversation with our advisory council, right? We try to be very intentional actually about kind of who's at the advisory council and who we are bringing close to kind of help us collaboratively be able to build the best company to offer the sustainability of a business solution for the industry, but also opportunities. And one of the things is that as a company, we have to understand there's two things at play, right? So you have people who are transitioning into young adulthood that we want to get in front of, and that is the immediate, right, return on investment. But there's also a need, if we want to build continuous sustainability, is playing the long game. And the long game is getting in front of young people during very formative years. Yeah. That is elementary school, and introducing them to what is possible as they're learning about this world, right? And this context, and identifying their interests or their gifts to what they can have a career in. And so we want to begin to move in front of that younger demographic at a very young age in elementary school and playing the long game. Yes, you don't get a return on investment immediately, but for the overall sustainability of your company or your industry, that's something that you definitely want to invest in. And so I would say starting in elementary.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And in addition to that, we do have other outreach efforts that are targeting the 16 to 18-year-old age range as well, as they are getting ready to make those transitional decisions for what's next after high school. The next question comes from an unknown source, which is, what is Target doing that is leading the way of companies and corporations to change the field of construction and beyond? That's for you, Steve.
What's Target doing? Well, I think what is Target doing? I think that this event, I think, is something that we realize that there's a pipeline that needs to be filled and created. We are in a construction itself is a $1 trillion industry in the U.S., but it's very, very fragmented. There's not like I think if you take the top 400 contractors. You'd get to someone that had probably 100 million in volume. So it's very, very fragmented. It's very local. That's the good thing about it. The challenge is it's hard to make one statement and have that kind of cover the entire country or the entire industry. So it's really our focus has been for a long time really around how do we engage our local communities in the way that they construct our stores. But we'll build one store in a market and we won't come back to that store for 10 years. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen in the community and the industry in between there. And so it's how do others and other owners continue this, and the contractors themselves kind of help to realize that a diverse and community-based workforce is what's important for their business success into the future, and that's what we're trying to do at Target is actually have that dialogue, bring people together to have those dialogues, and know that it goes beyond the solution is much bigger than any investment that Target would make.
No, that's great. So next question comes from Mariah at Eden Resource. Share how Construct Reach has been immediately successful in navigating traditional and real barriers for recruitment, inclusion, and retention of your youth firm, very different ethnic backgrounds in the trades of construction. So I'll re-answer that. I'll reread this. Share how Construct Reach. You got it? Okay.
I got it.
All right.
One of the things that we did on the front end was we didn't rush to start Construct Reach, right? We had dialogue for over a year about the state of the industry. And if there's an underrepresentation of minorities within the industry, then there's a reason for that, right? And when there's this disparity of maybe equity, if you will, we understood, okay, well, how do people view it? So we spent a lot of time, right, researching young people that come from different communities and asking them what their perspective was, what their understanding was, and what their view was of construction. And we also have young adults that are part of our advisory council. So I never wanted to create something for young people and didn't have them at the table, right, to empower them to have a voice as well. And that was from day one. And I'm talking 18, 19-year-olds, right, that their voice matters, right? Their perspective matters, because that's who we are trying to add value to. So when we did that research and we understood the negative connotation that was out there about construction, a very limited understanding, didn't think that they had a place within that, maybe getting past experience of internships communicated back to us and what they wanted to see, then we began to formulate, and we put together a formalized internship program that takes into account a diverse perspective. So we were able to research and permeate those different demographics, see things from their lens and what they would like to see to be an environment that they would feel like they were welcomed. And so we did that on the front end. So we did our due diligence on the front end. We like to think so, with a lot of research. And then, as we've had young people go through it, we've made sure that we've been able to, get feedback from them in a very candid way to make sure that the experience is matching what we're communicating on the front end.
All right, we have two final questions. This question is coming from John from Sherminty Construction. Historically, our recruitment efforts have focused on recruiting professionals or students in construction to our company. And we know where to find those candidates. But recruiting people to construction is entirely different. Where and how are others finding success identifying potential candidates without construction experience? And what strategies are successful in attracting them to our industry? We do participate in Construct Reach initiative, but struggle to find candidates.
No, that is a very good question. It is. It's a combination. So when you have people who are interested in construction, right? That is the well that is running dry, right? That we can no longer just continue to tap into as an industry. So that's why we have this. It feels like the industry has a heightened sense of awareness that there's this retirement crisis that's kind of looming over the industry, but there's a lot of demand that's going on right now. And even coming out of this pandemic, we kind of talked about the future of construction to young people that weren't even considering construction as a viable choice, right? And so we were able to provide these online resources for educators during COVID, and we were able to talk through the state of the industry, how the industry is navigating through this, but then possibly what the industry would look like on the other side of this, and being able to tie in their current interest with the construction industry. So making sure that we're able to connect, let's see, whether it's STEM or whether it's robotics or different things of that nature, technology, to showcase how there's an opportunity for you within the industry. Doing that in a very tailored way. Once again, partnering very heavily with educators, right, to provide these resources, being able to pivot based on where we are as a society, right? Because we didn't have this kind of discussion that was set up, let's say 7 months ago, 8 months ago. It was more so, okay, well, how do we begin to be relevant? How do we begin, right, to pivot as society pivots, to be as ubiquitous as we can and develop ways to get in front of not just people who are interested, but people that may not have made the connection between that yet. And so that's one of the things that we've been able to do kind of thus far. I would say, when this upcoming school year kind of comes up, as it looks like we're going to have a mixed bag throughout our country, with virtual and in person, and then moving into next year, that's where we're beginning to kind of shore up, what those options are for young people, how to actually get into the network, going through this badging system, if you will, that puts them in more visibility with companies who want to get quick access to talent. And so hopefully that was a good answer to the question.
Awesome. Last question is, as business owners in the industry, how do you assess inclusivity within your organization? Recommendations from any of the leadership on the panels, from your perspective, how would you advise ways to assess inclusivity within organizations as it stands right now?
I think there's always the visual test. Look around the table when major decisions are being made and see who's there and who's not there, and ask questions around why.
I would like to see, you talked about the career fairs, which is always geared towards professional jobs or white-collar jobs. How come we can't have career fairs around construction? And we invite young people purposely so that they know they can make a living, they can get that Mercedes or build that house, that their dreams can come true. And particularly for those young people who already have children who need to make a decent income, we should be looking at providing viable internships so that we can help that person to help them along to stay in the business, but also provide for those needs so that they can have a level playing field. Because just because everyone's here doesn't mean we're all at the same place. We can look around here, you can see I am challenged height-wise, so I can't even sit all the way back in the chair. But you guys, you can. But I make it level by coming forward. Just a little levity here. So, I would like to see those career fairs. I want to talk to you more about that. Getting in North High, getting in South High, getting in Roosevelt, the other schools, because I think it's pertinent. Even here and now, this is the time to have those conversations with those young people while they're younger, before all of the external forces are heaped upon them.
No.
Let's see, I think we have time for one more question.
No. She's
That's
saying
it?
no, you don't.
We're good? Oh. We sure? All right. We are, yes, we are.
All right, we have one final question since you made room.
All right.
This is coming from Jason at Albu and Associates. What are other national and regional diversity organizations are you partnering with and collaborating with to increase diversity in the industry, such as National Minority Supplier Development Council and/or the National Association of Minority Contractors?
That's a very good question. We've begun to make connections and begin to have dialogue with NAMEC, the last organization that you just mentioned, and beginning to talk about kind of what their contractor base looks like, what are some of the things that they desire to do as well, how do they begin to introduce opportunities to their community. And so we're beginning to have some good conversations. Most of that is taking place, I would say, with the chapter that is on the East Coast thus far, but definitely want to begin to have those conversations and dialogue with the Midwest, and especially up here in Minneapolis too. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, that concludes the first half of our day today. Hopefully that was very insightful. I feel like we had very good dialogue today. One of the things that we want to make sure that we do first and foremost is to thank our panelists for joining us for this Build to Heal event, kicking off these 3 days, having a much needed dialogue and conversation around some very critical, right, topics regarding society, regarding opportunity, but a very significant and much needed, right, if you will, kind of topic at hand. And so, thank you guys for adding value, sharing your different insights, your experiences, your thoughts, your perspectives. Hopefully with having such a diverse, if you will, kind of panel and group that is in here, to have the questions that were being asked, that we were able to get a lot out of it. Hopefully this feels like time invested, and this is only the first portion of the day, but we're going to transition now, into the second part of this day. And so thank you guys for being with us.
All right.
They're going to remind them to tune back